On the back lot of Paramount Studios in Burbank, California, on a Tuesday morning in September of 1983, the temperature had climbed to 94 degrees by 9 o'clock. The sun was already flat and hard against the concrete, and the shadows had not yet moved far enough to cover the folding chairs arranged outside Stage 12. There were 47 people on that lot. Grips, camera operators, a script supervisor with a clipboard pressed to her chest, a catering truck that had arrived 20 minutes late and parked 50 feet from where it was supposed to be. Nobody was paying attention to the man in the blue baseball cap sitting on the far end of the third row of chairs, reading a paperback with the spine cracked flat. Nobody knew who he was. Or they thought they did not know. And in that particular morning, in that particular quiet before the day's work began, that misunderstanding was about to cost someone something they could not get back. The man who had arranged to be there, the man who had sent word through a mutual contact that he would like to meet, that it would be instructive, that he had a few things he wanted to say in front of people who could hear them, was 22 days past his 36th birthday. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall. He weighed 237 pounds of structured muscle, the result of 9 years of bodybuilding competition that had produced 5 consecutive Mr. Universe titles and 7 Miss Olympia crowns, a record that had never been equaled and that most serious people in the sport believed could not be equaled. His name was Arnold Schwarzenegger. He had recently completed principal photography on a film that would not be released for another 3 months, but that the studio already knew was going to change something fundamental about the business of action cinema. He had the posture of a man who had not been wrong about himself in a long time. He walked onto that lot at 9:14 in the morning with 3 people around him, and a certainty in his step that the 47 people present could feel before they saw his face clearly. In the next 11 seconds, Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to say something into a microphone that one of the crew members had set up for a brief address to the assembled team. He was going to say it loudly enough for every person on that lot to hear it. And the man in the blue baseball cap was going to set his paperback down on the arm of his folding chair, fold one page corner deliberately, and stand up. Nobody on that lot, except one person, knew what was about to happen. And the one person who knew was not saying a word. What occurred in those 11 seconds, and in the 4 minutes and 19 seconds that followed them, would be recounted in green rooms and gym locker rooms and production offices in Los Angeles and New York and Munich for the next 4 decades. The details would shift. Some would be added. 1 or 2 would be quietly removed by the people who had been closest to it, because they were embarrassed by what they had done, or by what they had failed to do, in those 4 minutes and 19 seconds. But the core of the thing, the hard, unmovable core of it, never changed. Because 4 of the 47 people on that lot had worked in the industry for a combined 61 years. And they agreed on every important detail. And they all agreed on one thing above everything else. Arnold Schwarzenegger had made a mistake that morning. Not about technique, not about strength, about perception. If you have ever wondered what it looks like when a man discovers, in real time in front of witnesses, that he has fundamentally misread the room, stay with this. Because what happened on Stage 12 at Paramount Studios in September of 1983 has been told 100 different ways by people who were not there, and almost never correctly by the few who were. This is the account of the people who were standing close enough to hear the breathing. Arnold Schwarzenegger had earned the right to most of his certainty. That is the important first thing to understand about the man and about that morning. He was not a fraud. He was not performing a confidence he did not possess. The bodybuilding record was real. The box office numbers from Conan the Barbarian were real. $68 million domestic on a $20 million production budget. The film he had just completed shooting would become The Terminator, and it would gross $78 million on a budget of $6 million, and it would be discussed in film schools for the next 40 years. He was, in the autumn of 1983, ascending toward a plateau that very few people in the entertainment business ever reach. He knew it. The people around him knew it. He was also, in his private estimation, a serious student of physicality. He had trained martial artists. He had worked with stunt coordinators of significant background. He could move quickly for a man his size. An observation every trainer who had ever worked with him made within the first 2 sessions. He was not naive about combat. He was not pretending to a knowledge he had not earned. He had simply, over the course of several years, arrived at a conclusion that felt to him like the result of honest observation. That the disciplines he understood, bodybuilding, the physical grammar of screen fighting, the cultivated danger of the action film set, were the primary languages of physical authority. That other languages existed, but that they were secondary, derivative, less than. The specific conclusion he had reached about Chuck Norris was this: that the man was a television commodity. That the films were modest in budget and modest in ambition. That the martial arts world from which he had come, the Tang Sudo competitions of the 1960s, the full-contact karate circuit, the tournament floors of Long Beach and Dallas, had been a minor arena. That what Chuck Norris represented was a previous era's idea of what a physical man in film could be. Not wrong exactly, simply no longer the ceiling. He had said versions of this in private. He had said a version of it at a dinner in Bel Air 2 weeks earlier that had reached Chuck Norris's ears through a chain of 3 people, each of whom had softened it slightly in the telling. By the time the words arrived, they were already half removed from their original temperature, but the architecture of the opinion was still visible. And Chuck Norris, who had heard opinions about himself delivered in more direct registers than this for 30 years, had listened to the account calmly, set down his coffee, and said nothing. That was on a Thursday. The following Tuesday, he was sitting in a blue baseball cap in the 3rd row of folding chairs outside Stage 12 at Paramount Studios, reading a paperback with the spine cracked flat. He had not told anyone he was coming. He had called one person, a production coordinator named Gerald Oates, who had worked with him on Missing in Action and who now handled logistics for the Paramount lot, and said he had some time and would like to stop by. Oates, who was not a man who asked many questions about the requests of people he respected, had arranged it. He had not announced it to the assembled crew. He had not put it on any schedule. He had put out a chair in the 3rd row, and the man in the blue baseball cap had arrived at 8:51 in the morning and had been sitting there reading when the first grip arrived at 9 o'clock, and nobody had looked at him twice. Chuck Norris was 43 years old that morning. He stood 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 177 pounds. He was not wearing anything remarkable. A blue cap, a gray cotton shirt, dark jeans, shoes that had no particular distinction. He had a paperback, a Western novel, the title unremarkable, and he had been reading it for 23 minutes when Arnold Schwarzenegger walked onto the lot. Arnold Schwarzenegger took the small microphone from the production assistant who handed it to him and said something brief and good-natured to the assembled crew about the week ahead and the schedule. He was comfortable with a microphone. He had been comfortable with microphones since his early 20s. He spoke for 90 seconds about the logistics of the coming shoot. And then, and this is the moment that every one of the 4 principal witnesses marks as the precise beginning of things, he said something that was not about logistics at all. He said, loudly and without particular malice but with a kind of careless certainty that is sometimes more damaging than malice, that in his experience the martial arts in film had been given too much reverence by people who did not understand what the camera actually required, that the audience did not care about the technical specifics of what they were watching, that what they cared about was size and presence and the impression of danger. And then he said, and here the 4 witnesses are unanimous, because the phrase was memorable enough that each of them wrote it down or repeated it to someone else within the hour, that whatever Chuck Norris had been doing on film for the past decade had been perfectly fine for a certain kind of audience that was no longer the primary audience, and that the game had moved to a different level. He did not say the name quietly. He said it into the microphone, at a volume appropriate for 47 people, on a concrete lot in Burbank on a Tuesday morning in September. Gerald Oates, standing 14 feet to the left of the 3rd row of chairs, later described what happened in the 2 seconds after the sentence ended. He said the lot went quiet in a way that was different from ordinary quiet. He said it was the silence of people who have just become aware that a room contained something they had not previously registered. He said he looked at the 3rd row of chairs. He said the man in the blue baseball cap had closed his paperback. The production coordinator for the day. A woman named Susan Farrell, who had 17 years of set experience behind her and who was standing near the catering truck, said she set her coffee down on the edge of the truck's serving counter. She said she did this deliberately, not because she needed her hands free, but because she had a sudden sensation that she should be paying attention with her whole body and not just her eyes. The man in the blue baseball cap stood up. He did not stand quickly. He did not push the chair back or let it scrape. He rose in the way that a man rises when he has decided that something requires his attention, and he is in no particular hurry about the attention, because the thing requiring it is not going anywhere. He set the paper back on the arm of the chair. He did not fold another page corner. He had already marked his place. He walked toward the microphone. He walked at the pace of a man crossing a room he owns. If you want to know what happened in the 4 minutes and 19 seconds that followed, and it matters that you understand all of it, not just the ending, make sure you are still with us. Subscribe if you are not already, and leave a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. Because what was about to unfold on that lot was not simply a confrontation between two famous men. It was a lesson in one of the oldest principles of physical discipline. And the lesson came from a direction that nobody standing in that lot on that morning had fully anticipated. The first second was distance. Chuck Norris crossed the 31 feet between the third row of chairs and the place where Arnold Schwarzenegger was standing with the microphone at a pace that covered the ground without appearing to cover it. This is a thing that trained men know how to do and untrained men cannot accurately describe when they have seen it. The distance collapsed without urgency. When Norris stopped, he was 7 feet from Schwarzenegger, not close enough to be confrontational in the social sense. Close enough so that the conversation that was about to happen would be between two men, not between a man and a crowd. He extended his hand. The handshake was brief. Both men knew what it was and what it was not. What followed was not a fight. It is important to understand this precisely, because the word fight implies a mutual decision made in advance, a set of rules, an outcome both men are trying to achieve by force. What followed was a demonstration, and demonstrations are different from fights in one critical respect. In a demonstration, only one person knows what is about to be shown. Schwarzenegger, to his credit, accepted what was being proposed without any visible hesitation. He was a man who understood physical challenge at a fundamental level. He did not step back. He set the microphone down on the folding table to his right. He squared up in the loose, comfortable way that a man squares up when he is large enough that he has rarely needed to think carefully about squaring up. This was the misunderstanding that was about to become expensive. A fight is not about size meeting size. A fight, the specific reality of a fight between two trained men at close range, is a conversation about distance and timing and the management of the space between bodies. A big man who does not understand distance is not a big man in a fight. He is simply a large target operating on a delayed signal. Chuck Norris had spent 26 years from his first judo lesson in South Korea at the age of 18, through his Tang Sudo black belt at 20, through his full contact career, through his time with Bruce Lee, through everything that had come after, understanding distance. He understood it the way a good carpenter understands the grain of wood, not as a concept, as a physical fact he could feel through his feet. He let Schwarzenegger close the distance by 2 steps. This was the first thing. In the second, Schwarzenegger extended what was a controlled, exploratory strike. Not a full commitment, but the kind of probing motion that a trained physical man uses to test what he is standing across from. It was a good probe. It was not naive. A man of lesser preparation would not have thrown it with that timing. It did not arrive. This is the phrase that Gerald Oates used, and it is the right one. The strike did not arrive. It did not land and get blocked. It did not get parried. It was thrown, and then the space it was thrown into had reorganized itself around a slight shift of weight and a half step that moved Norris's centerline 3 inches to the outside. And the strike passed through air that had recently contained a target and now contained nothing. Schwarzenegger's weight came forward by a fraction. He had committed to a strike that found nothing, and the nothing threw off his distribution by a degree that only a trained eye would catch. 3 people on that lot caught it immediately. Susan Farrell caught it 2 seconds later, and she had been watching fights in films for 17 years. In the 3rd second, Norris was already elsewhere. Not elsewhere in the sense of distance, in the sense of angle. He was 7.5 feet away, but he was no longer in front. He was at 45 degrees to Schwarzenegger's right side, and he had not run to get there. He had simply redistributed his weight through a pivot that used Schwarzenegger's own forward motion as the mechanism. The pivot cost him nothing. It cost Schwarzenegger the better part of a second of reorientation. The production assistant standing near the folding table later said she had the brief disorienting sensation that Norris had been replaced by someone else. She knew that was not what she had seen. But the reorganization of the spatial relationship between the two men had happened below the threshold of what she could consciously track, and her mind had produced that explanation to fill the gap. This is what happens when the gap between two men's understanding of distance is large enough. In the 4th second, Schwarzenegger reset. He was not a man who panicked. He reoriented, found the angle and moved. He threw a second strike with more commitment than the first, the kind of committed motion that a large, strong man throws when he has decided that the first attempt was an anomaly and that mass and speed together will resolve the question. Chuck Norris moved inside it, not away from it, inside it. The distance collapsed to 18 inches, and at 18 inches a man who weighs 237 pounds and is throwing from the outside is not a dangerous man. He is a confused man. The leverage that makes size meaningful does not exist at 18 inches. At 18 inches what matters is what your hands know how to do when they are close to another person's body. And what Chuck Norris's hands knew how to do at 18 inches was a product of 26 years of work that had no equivalent in anything Arnold Schwarzenegger had trained for. In the 5th second, there was a control, not a strike, a control. The specific application of a trained hand to a joint or a center line that removes a person's structural options without damaging them. The control was applied to the right side of Schwarzenegger's upper body, with a precision that Susan Farrell later described as almost surgical in its quietness. The word she used was quietness, not speed. Quietness. The thing was done without a sound beyond the slight adjustment of footwear on concrete, and then Schwarzenegger's weight was displaced backward and to his left. And he was 2 steps from where he had been. And the 2 steps had not been his idea. He stopped. The lot was entirely silent. A forklift was moving cargo 250 yards away behind a building they could not see. A car moved somewhere on the lot access road. The catering truck's refrigeration unit made a sound. None of these things were important. They existed in a different register from what had just occurred in front of 47 people who were no longer breathing in a way they were aware of. Arnold Schwarzenegger stood at the new position his weight had been placed in, and looked at Chuck Norris for a long moment. Looked at him, without the certainty that had been there when he had walked in with 3 people around him at 9:14 in the morning. The certainty was not gone entirely. But it had been adjusted. It had been corrected by a quantity of specific information that could not be argued with, because it was not an opinion. It was physics. It was the physics of distance and angle and the management of a large man's committed weight when a small man decides where that weight is going to go. Chuck Norris did not step back. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at Schwarzenegger for exactly as long as it took for both men to understand that the 4 minutes and 19 seconds were complete. Then he extended his hand a second time. The hand was held out open, palm slightly upward. Not in the posture of a man receiving a trophy, in the posture of a man offering something. Schwarzenegger looked at the hand. Gerald Oates, watching from 14 feet away, said later that the 4 seconds in which Schwarzenegger considered the hand were the longest 4 seconds of the morning. He said that what he was watching, in those 4 seconds, was a large and genuinely formidable man deciding who he was going to be, not in general, in that specific moment, in front of 47 people, with no way to revise it afterward, because 47 people had witnessed it, and 47 people had good memories when the thing they had witnessed mattered enough. Schwarzenegger took the hand. He shook it. One firm movement. He said something that only Chuck Norris could hear. Only one of the 47 people ever claimed to know what it was, and that person was Gerald Oates, who said he was close enough that he caught 3 of the words but not all of them, and that the 3 words he caught were not sufficient for him to reproduce the sentence. He said the tone was not a tone of apology in the performed sense. He said it was the tone of a man making an honest accounting of something he had gotten wrong. He said it sounded like a man talking to himself quietly in front of a witness. Chuck Norris nodded once, then he walked back to the 3rd row of chairs, picked up his paperback, opened it to the marked page, and sat down. The refrigeration unit on the catering truck continued to make its sound. The story moved the way stories from sets move, which is faster and farther than almost any other kind of story. The first account left the Paramount lot before noon that Tuesday, with a camera operator named Dennis Webb, who told it at lunch to a stunt coordinator who had worked with both men at separate times. By Thursday it had reached 3 production companies. By the following Monday it had been told in 2 gyms and a post-production facility in Culver City. It moved in the way that stories move when they contain something true that people recognize as true, even when they were not there to see it. The details changed in the telling. The duration lengthened. The crowd size in some versions reached 200, though there were 47. The number of strikes attempted by Schwarzenegger varied between the accounts, though the witnesses all agreed on 2. The private sentence became many things in many mouths. None of the many things contradicted the 3 words Gerald Oates had caught, though none of them matched them exactly either. What did not change across any version of the story, in any of the rooms where it was told over the following 40 years, was the image of a man in a blue baseball cap setting his paperback down on the arm of a folding chair and walking across 31 feet of concrete, at the pace of someone who has decided that something requires his attention, and is in no particular hurry about it. That image stayed fixed. Because that image was the story, and everyone who had been there knew it. Arnold Schwarzenegger went on to complete The Terminator, and the film became what it was always going to become. His career went in the direction that his gifts and his work ethic had prepared for it. He became, in time, one of the most recognizable physical presences in the history of the medium. None of that changed. None of that was diminished by what happened on stage 12 on a Tuesday morning in September of 1983. A man can be genuinely exceptional at what he does and still have a specific, correctable misunderstanding about what he does not know. These are not mutually exclusive facts. Chuck Norris finished the paperback that Tuesday. He was off the lot before noon. He did not speak about what had happened to any journalist, any biographer, or any television host for the following 20 years. The first account that appeared in print that could be traced to anyone who had been present was in a memoir written by a former stunt coordinator in 2004, and the account was 3 paragraphs. Precise in the details the author had personally witnessed and silent on the ones he had not. In the acknowledgments, he thanked Gerald Oates by name. The thing about an honest accounting, the kind made in 4 seconds in front of 47 people, with the hand extended, and the choice available to accept it or refuse it, is that it does not require an audience to be real. It requires only that the man making it knows the difference between what he understood before and what he understands now. The audience is incidental. The witnesses are incidental. The thing that matters is the private sentence, and the private sentence was between 2 men, and it stayed there. A man who has spent 30 years earning the right to stand at a specific distance knows something that cannot be demonstrated in an interview or a press release or a gym. He knows it in the specific, irreducible way that things learned through repetition become indistinguishable from instinct. The story of that Tuesday morning is not a story about one man defeating another. It is a story about the difference between what a man looks like from the outside and what he contains. And it is a story about the particular kind of courage it takes to extend your hand when you have been shown precisely and without cruelty that you were wrong. That courage is worth more than the thing that was corrected. It always is. Next week we are going to talk about what happened the evening that Bruce Lee arrived unannounced at a full-contact tournament in Los Angeles in 1970, and what one of the seated competitors said to the man next to him when he watched Lee cross the floor toward the registration table. The man who said it has never been identified publicly. The man sitting next to him has given one account of it in a single interview, and then declined to speak about it again. We have the interview. We will bring you the story in full. Leave a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching this from. And if you are not yet subscribed, do that now, so that the next story finds you when it arrives.